And our third speaker is Liv Halperin, who's both a postdoctoral fellow on gender, conflict resolution, and peace at the Leonard Davis Institute for International Relations at the Hebrew University, and the director of research and policy at the ECF think tank that shapes policies aiming at advancing the Palestinian peace process. So Liv will speak to us about combining emotions, hope, anger, joy, and love in Israeli peace movements.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to speak after Deborah because we come from similar fields, and I bring qualitative methodology, which I think is a nice addition to today's conference where we had very different disciplines. I was talking to a few of you today, and I imagine my natural thought when we talk about nonviolent resistance is to see political scientists, ethnographists, anthropologists, and I'm less used to this kind of public and literature, so it was fascinating. And I hope what I'll bring today gives a little bit of a variety. It's very different. So I'll be looking at combining emotion. This is a paper that I've just published recently. I'm looking at nonviolent resistance and specifically peace movements in Israel, contemporary. And I look at gender and emotions. So this is something that we haven't looked at today together. The title of my paper is Combining Emotions, Hope, Anger, Joy, and Love in Israeli Peace Movements. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel very privileged that I study nonviolent resistance in the field and as a daily reality, as I study in real time. For me, that's the fun part of it. And as a matter of definition, there could be a question about whether peace movements fall under non-violent resistance. We've had very different conferences today that I don't know if they fall more or less into non-violent resistance, but in terms of the definitions that we've heard today from Professor Salzberger, for example, if we have the criteria of communicative, public, non-invasive, non-violent, all of this is something that we have with non-violent peace movements in Israel, Palestine. The research field, as I said, is nonviolent resistance, sociology of emotion, social and peace movements. And here I say it as if it was something evident, but there's a lot of disputes as to whether nonviolent resistance and peace and social movement scholarship is related, is combinable. I think it is. Gender in resistance, women in peace. And I'm looking at two contemporary movements that you probably all heard of because they're in the street right now, and they've been for many years, for the past 8 years, which is Standing Together, Omdim Yachad in Hebrew, and Nashim Osot Shalom, Women Reach Peace. So you can see on the picture, the purple people is standing together, the turquoise and white is Women Reach Peace. Now, my idea is to show you a short movie because we're all tired of all the talking and it will be very short. I'm not sure the technology will work. If it doesn't matter. But I might need a, well, let's see for volume. Can you see?
ברגע שיש הסלמה ויש מלחמה, אז אנחנו בעצם כולנו מתגללים ממה שקורה במלחמה. אני די בטוחה בזה שהאנשים שרוצים כאן לא רוצים לחיות במלחמה, לא רוצים למות, לא רוצים להיות בחרדות של מילויות. אנחנו נגד ההסלמה, אנחנו נגד המלחמה, אנחנו נגד שהשסע הזה שנמצא כאן, בתוך המדינה הזאת, בין ערבים ובין יהודים, ילך ובעצם יחמיר עוד ועוד.
אנחנו רוצים שותפות אמיתית, שוויונית. אנחנו יודעים שאפשר אחרת. אנחנו אפילו לא צריכים לדמיין את זה. יצאנו לרחוב באלפים.
Okay, so as you've seen, we're talking about standing together, and most of us here are active in the nonviolent resistance movement today in Israel. Those groups have been fighting for peace or against occupation. It depends how you want to talk about it for a few years already, and they're also part of today's demonstration in different capacity, in different ways. And in that sense, I call it civil resistance, nonviolent resistance, because they resist our government's policies of not trying to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, among other things. I'll just ask you to try and, I forgot to say it before you looked at this first movie, to try and look inside you and see what you feel when you see those movies, because I'm interested in emotions. Wait, so that's the number, the second movie, Women, Rich, Peace.
مرحبا مرحبا كيف حالكم؟ قولوا نعم للسلام نعم للسلام نعم للسلام We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe. We shall overcome someday. سوف نعيش بسلام سوف نعيش بسلام سوف نعيش بسلام يوم من الأيام.
I'll stop here because we could look at it forever. And it actually, by looking at the pictures, I've taken back to Deborah's presentation about what faces we see in the different movie. And we saw a lot. So as you've seen, there's Palestinian activists, Palestinians of Israel, Palestinians of the West Bank, and Israeli activists, Jewish activists. And it's interesting. We could have a talk later on how they use it and how they use who in different movies. But I hope you saw you felt from the movies that the movements trigger and use different kind of emotion. I won't put words in what you felt, but I think it's quite evident. So those are movies that both the movements use a lot, share on social media and reach out to their activists those are the movies that they use very often. The methodology, as I said before, is qualitative. It's my data was produced by 40 semi-structured in-depth interviews, ethnographical works, that means participating in both movements. Both before the COVID, it was all in the streets. When COVID started in March 2020, it was also online, digital ethnography. And of course, additional documents, social media, Facebook material, and all of those additional documents that you get when you are a member of those groups. It's quite overwhelming actually, because it never stops. Theoretical concepts I use is sociological concept of emotion work and feeling rules, but actually differentiate emotion work done on an individual basis with emotion work done by the movements rather than individuals. I looked at emotions in social movements. A lot of scholars have looked at different emotions in isolation and combined. And I look at the concept of moral, which is a very used concept in social movement scholarship, which is the idea that to motivate people to fight for their rights, you need to combine a positive and a negative emotion, typically indignation and hope, or there are different examples. I wanted to test if that's what I saw in the field with the two different movements. And so, first of all, I looked at, Standing Together is a movement that was created in 2015. As you can see, they have as a slogan, you see their office. So you can also see a bit of the style of the organization if you look at the Che Guevara and the type of syndicalist atmosphere that it creates. Where there is struggle, there is hope. This is the slogan of the motto of the organization. They have about 3,000 members. They want an Israeli-Palestinian peace, but they want also an egalitarian society. So they have a very holistic mandate, socialist-based mandate, they practice intersectional politics, which means that they encourage social solidarity through what I call intersectional struggles. They will say, join the different struggles, being solidary with other types of struggles. They believe in Jewish-Arab partnership and try to make it as genuine as possible, not without issues, but they are trying, and they mostly do demonstration and campaigns. And by the way, they were in the street and very active many years before the pro-democracy protests that we're experiencing now, and they still are, but they lost a bit of the media light. I mean, they never really had media light, but now they're just one group among very many. but they're still there. And Women Wage Peace has 45,000 followers. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that it was established a year before Standing Together, and it has that many followers because a follower is anyone who ever signed or attended an event and put their name on Facebook or so it's a different way of counting. So we can count. I evaluate a few hundred active members. They want an agreement between Israel and Palestine. They don't say which one. They want a greater involvement of women. So there's a clear gender aspect to this movement. It's women-led. It's supposedly non-partisan, so not related to any political party in Israel. This is debatable, but it's the idea is that it should attract women from all boards of Israeli society. It has a maternalist discourse, which is not the object of this particular talk here, but I think is a very interesting subject that I research elsewhere. It uses a maternalist life-oriented discourse. It creates a feeling of belonging on the basis of sisterhood and caring practices. Here also, this is debatable because sisterhood with different minority is a debatable subject, whether it is really possible to create that sisterhood and what kind of sisterhood it is, but it does create a feeling of belonging to a group. And they do marches, crossroads, meeting. They also parlor at home meetings, and they also lobby at the Knesset, or they used to lobby at the Knesset, because the present Knesset is unlobbyable, I guess. So that's Women Wage Peace. Now, I looked at the way they work on the emotions, and I looked at what I called hope-related emotion work. I realized very quickly in the research that both movements really base their emotion work on hope, and they invest a lot of effort, conscious or unconscious efforts to do it, but they do it very differently. Namely, Standing Together triggers hope and anger, but it does it as part of an intersectional politics. So it uses the word hope and connects it to struggle, power, togetherness. As I said before, it builds social solidarity by trying to connect struggle across the gender, national, ethnic, and socioeconomic barriers. And it practices a certain type of positivity in that it actually always tries to say positive, to add positive ideas and not only criticize what's going on. So they say what they want and not only what they are against, and they celebrate successes. But I call it a limited politics of positivity because they do this while combining hope with the negative emotion of anger, which take us back to the moral battery I was talking about before. And many will say, and in literature, you find a lot of paper that will say that actually hope and anger is the winning formula for any non-violent resistance group, any peace movements. If you want change, if you want revolution, you need both the positive and the negative. You need the anger, but you need the hope that things can get better. So I'll one example is one of the of course, those are all not the real names of the activists, but Meir, an activist from Standing Together, explained that the movement understands that it needs to offer people not just anger, but also hope that together we have the power to change things. And I raise your attention to the little image that you have, Bo Koasim, Come Angry, which is something that Standing Together activists you are used to receiving on their telephone or WhatsApp before a demonstration. So please don't forget to be angry for the demonstration. Women Wage Peace is quite different. It triggers hope, but I argue that it triggers hope as in the package of only positive emotions. So it will use the word hope, but it will connect it to heart, body, home, family, children. It will create this community of belonging on the basis of sisterhood and caring practices, even bodily intimacy, science, hugging, and all kinds of welcoming practices. And it will practice what I call an absolute politics of positivity. It will encourage positive language and attitude, disencourage any kind of criticism, disencourage any kind of talk about the occupation, for example, and we'll try and combine hope with other positive emotions. So example that I can talk about here is joy and love and others. And as you've seen in the movie, they use music a lot, music that really triggers hope, but there's different ways of producing love and joy. So for example, Lisa said, about one of the hope marches that was organized by Women with Peace, that she got there, she saw Palestinian women, lots of Palestinian women, and we marched all of us together. That was a feeling as if I had been in Woodstock, apart from the drugs and the rock music, a feeling of fraternity and love. She uses the word fraternity. I imagine it's because the word sisterhood doesn't really exist in Hebrew. So maybe the translation is like, maybe sisterhood would have been a better translation here. A feeling of fraternity and love, because we sang the whole way. That was Lisa. Kfir, who is an activist of standing together, recalled that actually some of the things that he really liked about Women with Peace, those are very different movements, but still Kfir was actually going to both activism, and he really had to admit sometimes that it was much more joyful and full of love at Women with Peace, and that it was actually quite enjoyable to sometimes enjoy activism and not only come and be angry, which I thought was a courageous approach. And just before I have another conclusion to say, I would say that here what I can conclude is that both movements, as we've seen, work on their activist emotion, not consciously, I would say. I mean, a researcher can come and see it as work. It doesn't mean that the activists or the leaders know that they're working on their activist emotion. But I'd say that whether consciously or unconsciously, they trigger a different set of combination, hope and anger for standing together, which corresponds to literature and the idea of a moral battery, and joy, love, and hope for Women with Peace. And I can think of a politics of positivity as a spectrum and try to place the different organization, non-resistant groups along this spectrum. So I think it's a choice of the organization, of the groups, depending on their ideology, their goals, their composition, to place themselves somewhere on that spectrum. Implication of this is that movements definitely can benefit from actively working on their activist emotion and from triggering hope. So if they're not doing it consciously, they can actually benefit from learning how to do it, taking examples of those two movements and many others. And maybe my last, I think it goes without saying that all of what I said now on those two contemporary Israeli peace movements apply to, I think, any kind of groups that qualitative scholars like me would be happy to investigate. So today I just added a few pictures of the groups that we are seeing in the contemporary pro-democracy, non-violent resistance protests in Israel, the Pink Front and the Bonot Alternativa, the lady in red. I had the t-shirt that stayed in my bag. The Mothers Against Violence, Love is Love, and Tikva, which was in one of the first demonstrations in January, when it was still raining, an activist came with the word Tikva. So I hope that this presentation gave you a little taste and a desire to go demonstrate and look at what emotions are around and what it does to you. Thank you very much.